My name is Carrie Kopnick, and I am honored to serve the Chaplaincy Institute as your community minister. And we're so glad that you've joined us today for Chi Talks. This is a monthly event exploring the facets of spirituality through an interfaith lens with the Chi community. It happens every month on the third Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific. We talked about the recording, and we are going to have time for questions at the end. Actually, Deb's presentation isn't going to be too long, so get your questions ready either for Deb or for me about the Chaplaincy Institute in general. So today we have with us Reverend Deb Hansen. Deb was ordained by the Chaplaincy Institute community in 2007. She lives in beautiful northern Michigan half the year. In the winter, Deb volunteers in a shelter for people seeking refuge from violence, poverty, and political and climate instability at the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso. She's been a border crosser most of her life when it comes to culture, language, religion, ethnicity, and worldview. She's an interfaith spiritual companion with an interest in collective healing and the reclaiming of culture. She has advocated for access to clean, affordable water and for energy democracy at the community and state level for many years. She's no stranger to eco-anxiety and sorrow as we enter this time of climate instability and the sixth mass extinction. For her, reclaiming a reverence and respect for life and learning to reconnect with the seasons and cycles of the natural world, joy and laughter are medicines. Deb's interests include writing, foraging, courageous conversations, ancient and embodied wisdom, and finding joy and beauty in community and then simplicity of everyday life. Now I invite Andrew Church to say a little bit about Chi.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rev Carrie, Rev Deb Hansen, and everybody here. I really love this. Just a couple of words about Chi. Many of you already know this. If you don't, let me just remind you that the Chaplaincy Institute is the preeminent interfaith seminary and community in the U.S., with students or graduates from 41 U.S. states and 5 countries in the Western Hemisphere. We've been around for over 23 years now, and we've graduated over 500 individuals from our chaplaincy program and our spiritual direction program. Those graduates collectively hold, conservatively, around 10,000 spiritual care interactions each year. Now, that is a wide and growing reach. We are the elder in this space of interfaith education and ordination, and one of the absolute best programs out there. Now, my favorite part, even though we have this experience and impact, we still feel like a small and friendly community where you can feel seen, welcomed, and that you matter because you do. Without folks like you, we wouldn't be here. And lastly, we train our chaplains and spiritual directors to serve people of all faiths and people of no particular faith in settings as diverse as healthcare, individual practice, the military, social and environmental justice settings, and homeless outreach ministry. And lots of entrepreneurial versions of what chaplaincy and interfaith ministry can look like. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Deb. Today's talk is Building Bridges. Thanks so much, Andrew. Sorry. Today's talk with the Reverend Deb Hansen is Building Bridges, Witnessing and Working in a Shelter at the U.S.-Mexico border. Thanks so much, Deb. Take it over.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. I'm getting a message on my screen that says my network bandwidth is low. So unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. And I hope you're able to hear me well. It's a pleasure to be with you. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, so very glad you're here. I am going to read a few prepared remarks, and then I'm going to go into a little slide set because I think to actually see images is really nice, and then we'll open it up for conversations and questions. All right, good. So I am spending my third winter volunteering at Annunciation House in El Paso, Texas. It is a place of hospitality and grace, offering sanctuary and practical support for people seeking refuge from violence, poverty, economic, political, and climate destabilization, and more. It is an oasis in the storms of life. Places like this, for me, are also prayers of possibility. They offer a lived experience of mutual respect, relationship, and solidarity. We see daily that people from many places can live and work together in peace, where everyone's basic needs are met in a supportive community extending well beyond these three houses, its network of congregations in currently one hotel. We tap into a variety of skills working in a shelter. We answer phones, we open doors, we register new guests, we do laundry and casework, we make sure the house is clean, and 3 meals are put on the table. We enroll kids in school if they're going to be with us for a longer time. We call sponsors and provide transportation for our guests to the bus station, the train station, or the airport. When we have the time and energy, we organize entertainment in the evenings. And for me, a story really brings this experience to life. So I've got 3 to share with you. First one, he mostly kept to himself. Before he and his wife leave, he mentions needing a cornea transplant. One eye definitely looks sore. He rolls up his sleeve. Wide ropes of scars cover his arm from an acid attack. Cartel violence. Another family with young children understands extortion. They had a gun brandished in their faces. Second story. He is young, tall, and gentle. His smile lights up the room. He was here for 3 weeks and gave me permission to share his story. He is from Congo and a candidate for asylum. We communicated in French, which remains the country's official language, a remnant of its colonized past. I interpreted for him, an attorney who got him and 4 other people from Africa out of detention. He had been in jail for 3 months. He has no family here, but he does have friends. His father had been killed in the fighting. An emotion wells up in his eyes. He believes his mother and younger sisters are alive, but he doesn't know where they are. He fled Congo to Brazil, where he worked in a hotel. In the quiet hours, he likes to pick up the guitar that's kept in the common room and sing softly to himself. The humanity and commitment of his attorney touched me. Where do you want to go? He said. A New England state where he knows people. Our guest, believe it or not, is excited about moving to a state-run shelter. Friends raised $200 for his bus fare. I used to live in that city, the attorney remarks. I have friends who might help. He suggests waiting a week so he can make arrangements to get a plane ticket. Agreed. Oh, by the way, we got E out yesterday. He's free. E was the last of the group in detention. Our guest face fills with delight. Hey, I'll call him. You can talk to him yourself. E picks up and a joyful conversation follows. A magical moment in this community of care. Third story. He stood in the doorway as I was on shift yesterday evening. I sat him down and pulled up a chair. to sit in front of him, knee to knee. He cries and murmurs how he is going to leave his family and go out on his own. He talks about his sadness and dreams of having his own apartment and money. If you're a parent, you've probably experienced something similar. I tell him I agree with him about his situation, and he is right about being upset and very brave. I tell him his life is important and we care about him. After some time, Mom comes to fetch him and takes him back to his room where she and his 4 siblings sleep. He is 10 years old, bright, beautiful, and very, very sensitive. He and one of his siblings wet the bed most nights. There are no easy answers that I know of. If governments, particularly ours, did less harm, more people could feel safe to remain in their communities with their familiar culture and language. And this is not just about people coming from far off places. With climate destabilization, cities like Miami will eventually go under the waves as sea levels continue to rise. Where will all these people go? When I felt the tug to go to the border, it didn't make sense. I had been working on water, climate, and energy issues in my home state of Michigan. I hadn't been involved in immigration before, and I'm not a policy person. I wanted to see for myself what was going on here. I know I wanted to treat people with the same respect and concern that I would want for myself and my loved ones in similar circumstances. It is demanding, rewarding, and sacred work. It helps me stretch beyond my bubble of privilege, and I hope it makes me more fully human. For me, this is about culture change and a change of heart. I reflect on what things might have been like for my ancestors as they came here to Turtle Island from different places in Europe. I reflect on what things might have been like for the peoples who had already inhabited and cared for this land for thousands of years, and how unhealed history repeats itself in the present. So with that, let me share. There we are. Now I'm hitting this. There we go. Okay, great. Guess it takes a minute. All right. You've probably seen on the news, this is what the border looked like just before I arrived in late December. You can see the Rio Grande there. It is a very narrow river. You see the freeway and you see the border wall in the distance. At the peak of the latest crisis, this was the scene at Sacred Heart Church, which is a very popular sanctuary in the second barrio, the second neighborhood, the second ward, just a couple blocks from the border. Traditionally, Border Patrol does not go into schools here. They don't go into shelters. They don't go into houses of worship, funeral homes, etc. So this is a place where people had sanctuary, and the church opens up a gym to serve people a hot meal, and they have space for a certain number of people to stay inside. There was not adequate space to house everyone. However, there is now. that this was really a heart-wrenching scene. Most of the people, I usually walk by Sacred Heart once a week just to kind of see what's going on, to kind of take the temperatures. Our shelters are all pretty full right now. A few people coming and going, but we're basically full. Venezuela right now is melting down. I really can't fathom the realities. It's estimated that literally 1/4 of the entire population of the country has fled. And it's about violence, it's about inflation, it's about economic devastation. And the sanctions that the United States is putting on Venezuela and other countries around the world are part of the harm that's done. 80%, it's estimated, of those who left have stayed in Latin America and the Caribbean. So really, we're seeing just a minority of the people who are looking for a safe place to go. I have worked in all 3 of the houses that we maintain currently. This is the original house that you see on the left. It's called A House or Annunciation House. And that's a little confusing because that's the name of the organization as well. This is what I would call El Paso's answer to the Flatiron Building in New York City. Each one of our shelters has a particular mission. I worked at A House last year. I worked for 2 weeks in one of the other newer houses this year, and then came back to A House. A House is the only shelter that is wheelchair accessible, and you'll see how that relates to our mission shortly. So daily life in a shelter includes putting 3 meals on the table. And our guests and our volunteers, we work side by side with each other. Everyone's got their assignments, and things don't work unless everybody pulls together, and it usually works pretty well. This is the clothes closet. So when we have people who are, for example, leaving for cold country in New England or in the Midwest, they usually need a coat, they need a hat, they need some gloves to keep them warm. And when people come from detention, everything is taken away from them. So at least what we can make available is a change of clothing. This is the travel board and our weekly schedule. And so things are really different now than they were last year. How things usually worked here is people would be released from authorities to us, and they would have a sponsor, you know, a friend or a family member somewhere in the United States. They were in the deportation process, but they had papers that gave them permission to travel anywhere in the 50 states and a court date. The big difference that we're finding this year, and again, almost really all of our people are from Venezuela right now, is that there aren't a lot of Venezuelan communities in the United States at this point. So people don't have a sponsor. They don't have a place to go. So that makes life a little bit more challenging. There's usually a lot of laundry to do when a lot of people are coming and going. We actually wheel the laundry to our administrative house and leave our new washer and dryer for our guests to use for their personal laundry. And here you see some of the dish towels and the dishcloths that are used. We use a lot of those to clean up. Our particular house, last year we were running, I would say, a census right around 25 people usually, sometimes more, sometimes less. This year we're running about double that. We recently had a couple families, Kurdish families from Turkey. So even though most of our guests are coming from somewhere in Latin America, we do see people from Haiti, from Cuba, from Africa, and many other places. This is our new baby. And right now she is about 3 weeks old and she is so chill. I took her mom and her to a check-in with ICE, with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, late last week. This was a birthday party. You know, we try to make this as much like a home-like setting as we can. And one of the little girls had a birthday party and it was really sweet. So I wish I could show you their faces, but obviously there's good reasons why that would not be appropriate. This is the border wall. People come over this wall and some of them don't make it. Some of them probably scurry off into the shadows, but the mission of a house is to receive the injured guests who have come over the wall and lived but broken their bodies. If you know anybody in healthcare, they will tell you that they rarely see these metal things on the left, which is called an external fixator. We see this regularly with people who fall off the wall. This is to hold your bones in place until they mend. And then most of our guests need surgery when they come in with something like this. We don't have nursing staff, so our guests have to be ambulatory. They have to be able to get around on a walker. And part of our responsibilities when we're on shift is taking the pain medication that's been prescribed by the doctor. We do 3 rounds of pain medication a day. So yeah, pretty intense. This year, I am a community volunteer. I am not living in the shelter regularly, so that means I'm not working 6 days a week there with 2 days off a month. So I get to do some other things this year that give me a little bit of a broader perspective. And one of the things I try to do is to go to our sister city of Ciudad Juarez, south of the border, and to serve a meal to people in transit at the cathedral downstairs. They have space to serve 100 people at a time. And so we serve food in shifts. And they have been serving kind of at the peak over 600 people in an afternoon. And when I was there last time, we served a little over 400. And what really gets to me are the children. These are people who presumably are living on the street right now. They've either been deported or they are on their way north to take their chances. It's not all work. We have fun. This was a going away breakfast for me and a couple of our other volunteers. I think I mentioned I spent 2 weeks working in house when I first got here this year. And this is Martha's, one of our favorite places for huevos rancheros. We had a great show at the Plaza Theater with Pink Floyd Laser Spectacular. It was fun. And this Friday, I'm going to be going to the El Paso Symphony is playing Led Zeppelin on Fridays. So I'm looking forward to that. We had a little moisture coming down the other evening, and that's all it took to get the poppies started up in the mountains. And one of the cactus is in bloom. So these were the first. And soon the hillsides, the mountainsides are going to be covered with gold with these poppies. And that's really a lovely thing to see. We're short of volunteers, particularly year-long people who are often young people, recently graduated, but we will take volunteers for as little as 2 weeks, a minimum commitment. And on the Annunciation House website, if you know somebody who might be interested in having this experience, we do need the help right now. And I do blog pretty regularly. I see Rebecca online here, and I was faithfully following her journey in the fairgrounds of Chico with the climate refugees from the campfire. And I think, Rebecca, you really inspired me to start this blog. So it's a hidden page, so I would have to invite you. So if you're interested in that, my email is up there. Feel free to send me an email and I will invite you to the blog. So that is it for the presentation. So I'd like to open it up to see what questions or comments you might have. Hi, Jim.
I think I need to change settings so
yeah.
people can unmute themselves, but I'll do that right now.
Hi.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Deb. How are you
Hi.
doing? Thank you
Good.
so
I like
much.
the stage scene.
I like the presentation very much. I'm calling in from Southern California. We also have similar shelters and helping people who are in between. They're over the fence, but they don't have any place to go. So appreciate it. I have two questions. That one slide you show with a bunch of statistics about Venezuela, did you know where the source is? So that's the first question. Second is when you work in the shelter, besides French, obviously, do you have to speak Spanish or other things? Because for those people who do not speak French or Spanish, or
Yeah, it's a great
Ghanaian.
question. It helps. Yeah. Celia, it helps enormously, as you would imagine, but I don't know if you've used Google Translate. That does a pretty good job. And last year we had a long-term volunteer, a young gal, and she spoke no Spanish at all. And she'd give a house tour to a busload of new guests with Google Translate, and it worked just fine. I can tell you that it doesn't work well for Turkish. We really had some challenges communicating with our Turkish families, but yeah, there are a number of people here who don't speak Spanish.
We have Afghans right now. We have Afghans. You know, the people.
I have a friend in Southern California who is doing some of that work with the Afghani people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So the first question is, what was the source of your data?
Oh, the source. There are several, really multiple sources for this. I can't remember the one that I pulled out of an article. There was a talk the other evening by Lisa Sullivan, who is a lay Maryknoll missioner, and she and her family lived in Venezuela for 30 years. So she lived this personally. And her family is all out of Venezuela now and living in 5 different countries. So she's living this personally. Thanks for the question.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I see a comment from Arthur, and yeah, how to talk about this.
Can you ask
There is,
I think it was privately just
a
to you.
lot of, oh, just to me?
Which is fine. Just repeat the question so we all know what it was. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. The statement was that 30,000 Venezuelan people a month are coming to the United States based on some changes in policy. Not really. So much of this is about posturing and doing things that sound good in an article. It is true indeed that the current administration has said that the US will accept 30,000 Venezuelan people a month. Here's the criteria. They have to apply from Venezuela. They can't be here. They can't be en route. They have to have a sponsor. and they have to have a background check, which makes perfect sense to me. So what I was saying earlier is that there aren't Venezuelan communities here to have a family reunification. So I don't know exactly how many people are actually applying and coming. It is possible, not through this particular policy, to apply online for asylum. And there's risk to that if you don't have your documentation. That is literally putting you in the deportation process, but you're not going to have to deal with a court system. You're going to deal with a federal agency that has a reputation of being a little bit more humane. So yeah, it's really interesting to be here, to hear things anecdotally versus, you know, the sound bites that we hear on the news or read in the paper. Thank you, Arthur.
Two questions in the chat, kind of interrelated. Can you speak to interfaith and the tools you've used? How does that, or does it inform the way you show up in the shelter and this work? And how much are you using your ministerial spiritual skills in these settings? So interfaith and skills.
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. Yeah, so almost all people who come from Latin America are culturally Christian, Catholic, if not religiously so. Most of our guests who come from Turkey are Muslim, and we have some challenges in our current setting. The chapel, the prayer room is on the second floor, so it's not easily available to our injured guests, and it really is challenging. So one of the things that I try to do, you know, we've had guests coming in from South America who have been wearing a Star of David here. Everyone is welcome. We have a very diverse set of volunteers from a variety of traditions. In the listening, in the being with, that's where the ministerial skills come in. Not only that, but also with our volunteers, our fellow volunteers, particularly those who are with us for the first time. We had evidently some people, four guys coming to the door the other day, and they had A2 caps on, which being from Michigan, I would have said, oh, that's Ann Arbor. And evidently that means the Second Amendment. And they started filming the volunteer and wanted to know what we were doing here. And, you know, word of mouth passes. The shelters aren't labeled, but a lot of people drop off food and various things. Last year, we have people, many of our guests, we have indigenous people coming from Guatemala, people from Mexico who are in an airplane in an airport for the first time in their life. So one of the things we offer is we have airport volunteers, and they keep in touch with us. So when we've got somebody that we're giving a ride to the airport, some of the things that I would take for granted, they meet them. Sometimes they need a wheelchair to get around, but they help them print out their boarding passes. They help them navigate the airport up to the security check, if not actually to their gate, and that's a huge help. But there were a couple people last year, these are the only incidents I know of recently where, you know, these people were being harassed. Yeah, so that's hard on the volunteers as well. And one of the things that we do for the in-house people is during the week, all the volunteers meet for a reflection after breakfast in the morning. And so we rotate. Somebody might bring in a poem or an image or a little art project. People check in and talk about how they are doing. And then there's a little business that's conducted for the day. that type of thing. So that's enormously helpful in setting a spiritual tone. And if there are other questions in the chat.
Deb, I noticed how emotional I felt emotion in your voice as you were sharing the stories. I felt myself tearing up. And I just wonder how you take care of yourself emotionally as you do this work.
Yeah. Thank you, Becca. It's a real heart opener. It's easier this year since I'm doing some writing and I'm not in the shelter day and night. So yeah, outside of that, getting out in nature, going for a walk is enormously helpful. There is a whole community of people north of the border and south of the border whose work they have something to do with this community of people in transit, and that's very inspiring for me, is to get to know them, to really feel like I'm part of this larger community, and to have fun, you know, to go for a nice dinner. So I think it was, you know, I still, you know, taking this mom to an ICE check-in and seeing her nursing her baby in this cold, sterile setting. And I've got to tell you her story. She has a 4-year-old daughter who mom and dad left with some of the grandparents. And so they set off. She must have been 5 or 6 months pregnant at the time. Venezuela is in the northeast of South America, and they came here on foot, and it took them 3 months to do that. In Panama, you have to walk through an area where there is not one road, called the Darien Gap, and it's jungle. It is mountains, it is swamps. If you die there, there is no way to take you out. So people are walking by bodies. And she and her husband somehow got separated in the gap. And so he is in Juarez, sleeping on the street. He's not seen his new baby. And yeah, it's a tough situation. It's really a tough situation. So I want to keep my heart soft with this work. I think I'll know when it's time to quit, when the stories don't bring me to tears anymore. And I know you feel that too. I remember your stories from the fairgrounds, really, really moving and powerful. Slice of life, the raw experience of being human in these times, for sure. Good question. Do you ever wonder what your ancestors went through? Those who came from different places, those who were trafficked here. Yeah, something I wonder about. Yeah, I love community ministry. It reminds me to some extent of my experience as a hospital chaplain in Detroit, that you never know what the day will bring. And it's a case of dancing with whatever is. And I'm telling you, I had a shift 2 weeks ago that was a whirlwind. And I had one last week working with my shift partner, and we had fun. We had a good time.
Deb, one more question. How did you handle the people who are harassing you coming to the door?
It was not me there at the time. This was a new volunteer who's just here for 2 weeks and probably right around my age, actually. So I had just gotten back. Yeah, I think it was from taking mom and baby to the ice check-in. And this had just happened. So I was able to be with her and just feel her anxiety and upset. And I asked her to call our house coordinator right away, you know, because this relates to the security of the house. So this is serious business. But strangely enough, in both of those cases, I answered the call from our airport volunteer who has been so dedicated for many years to this work. And it's just enormously upsetting. So that's chaplaincy as well. Yeah, so what will happen behind the scenes? I don't know. There are cameras on the building. The authorities know where we are, but these are our violent times, right? You know, it was the August before I got here for the first time in 2019. It was when COVID really was just starting here. That was when somebody came into the Walmart and started shooting the place up. So we have not had that type of experience. It's not to say that it couldn't happen. And again, just from all sides, the political stuff that goes on. I think it was last December, there was a state of emergency declared in El Paso, which gives the state more powers to send in troops and whatnot. And the governor had asked the attorney general to investigate humanitarian organizations. So I don't know whether that was just for show, whether that was dropped, but you know, I feel safe in El Paso. It's a warm, welcoming, friendly city. And one of the contradictions here is that militarism makes the economy hum. You know, it's really incredible. We have Fort Bliss here. You're hearing helicopters go out every morning at the end of the day to be patrolling the river and ICE, Customs and Border Protection, you know, the regular police and all that. So it's really, it's a contradiction. It's a contradiction to live with that.
I saw that Jim had his hand up. And did I turn your video off, Jim? I'm sorry.
Yes, you did. Deb, good to see you.
Oh, Jim, it's good to see you.
I was wondering
Well,
what was
there
your
you are. There you are.
what was your call like? How did you find this place, and how did you initiate even the search to go there?
Well, what happens in my life is I get these pulls to do things and they don't make any sense at first. And then they start making sense in hindsight. So this isn't the first time this happened. Was, you know, I just felt this tug, this pull, this, I don't know, you need to go to the border. And one of my colleagues at Star King, Zeb Green, if anybody knows him, it was really clear that he had found a call here at the border, but I didn't know whether he was in Arizona. He got involved with a Poor People's Campaign. I think the School of the Americas Watch down here. And I didn't know much. I just knew he was at the border. So I've learned to listen better as I've gotten older when I get this message from the beyond that says, you need to do this, sister. And it really didn't make sense to me at all at the time. But I'm like, okay, I've been through this before. I get it. This is not going to go away. So I shot a little note over to Zeb and said, Zeb, can you help me? Can you suggest a couple of different organizations that I could look into? And just as cool as a cucumber, he says, you go to Annunciation House. That's what you do. And I'm like, well, okay, fine. And it was as simple as that.
I'm going to jump in and invite anybody who has questions about the Chaplaincy Institute. Deb obviously has much life experience and has learned a lot, but is ordained by Chi. So if you're feeling like you want to ask any questions, please bring them up now, or you're welcome to touch base with us later too. Or more questions for Deb too.
Well, I'll just say that one of the things, it's been a while since I was going through the program. But the one thing that was really powerful for me is just the active encouragement to be as creative and out there as possible in the types of ministry that we did. And there's been a number of my colleagues whose work has touched me deeply.
If I could speak to that, I would say that it comes and goes in waves and phases. There were phases when I was really putting myself out there for things in ministry. And then there are phases where I get still and just wait for things to come to me. And so it's been 20 years now of, kind of phases of having to go out and make things happen. And sometimes you really have to step forward. You have to be the one that steps into it. It doesn't just come to you. And I think that you have to cast your own seeds. You have to put yourself out there to see what Spirit wants you to do. It doesn't happen just sitting in your room all the time, but then there are other times when I really need to pull back and sit in my room and just wait and see what comes to me.
Well said. And I think particularly for those of us who work on the threshold, and interfaith is more normal now than it was when at least I was stepping out of school and putting it out there. But I'm constantly amazed at just the Catholic infrastructure here. And I feel like I see absolutely the best of the Catholic tradition here in the borderlands. Interesting fact, DNA evidence, up to 25% of the entire Hispanic population of the US has some Jewish ancestry in their DNA. And that goes back to the Middle Ages and the Inquisition. The Jews were expelled from Spain literally the day before Columbus sailed for the New World. Lots of history, many layers. Yeah. In the ebb and flow, you said that so well, of feeling the call, and being nourished from the rest, from the stillness, and then taking that back out into the world for a while and getting worn down again. Chico Friends meeting. yeah, so all of this, we're in a time when everything is ebbing and flowing, and things are falling away. New life is springing up all the time, and it's challenging, and it's exciting and rewarding, and kindness and hospitality are powerful medicines. So thank Chi for being hospitable to me at the time when I wasn't feeling like I fit in too many places in the religious world.
I feel like sometimes when we leave silence, people will jump in, but I do have one question for you, and then we can let people be uncomfortable and until they will ask the question that's moving in their heart. Was there anything, as you answered this call, as you said you've learned over the years that this is a voice that won't go away, is there anything that scared you before you said yes? How do you step into that courage or move into that courage?
I think it just comes from a lifetime of experience of feeling like I'm feeling my way down a dark hallway. And it reminds me, Carrie, I was looking for an interfaith spiritual direction program when I stumbled onto Chi through Lauren Artris, who's one of the movie stars of The Labyrinth. And there's this new school. I know you're saying you're looking for a spiritual direction program, which really wasn't emphasized at the time at Chi. And she said, yeah, it's this chaplaincy program. I'm like, what? And I looked at the website and it just was blown away. I'm like, this is the program I would have invented for myself if I were inventing a program. And I sat on it for a year. That's how you can see how things have changed. I'm like, I'm going to fight this. This doesn't make any sense. I'm the last person in the world who would go into ministry. You know, what is this all about? And it just wouldn't go away. And I had a chat with Gina Rose, and I'm just like, okay, I give up. And literally, I was doing some career transition work, and literally the day after I gave up, I got a call, and there was a big gig for General Motors in Detroit, a 3-month gig. So I immediately had the wherewithal, to pay for 3 trips to California. Live and learn. Live and learn. Yeah. Like Rebecca was saying, you have to be connected to that still place inside to hear I find that what's the little tap on the shoulder, if I don't pay attention, gets progressively a little bit more aggressive over time. So, yeah.
All right, friends.
My Buddhist teacher always say, it's not what you want to do, is what's showing up.
Yeah, meeting the day. And, that's Buddhism. Zen is one of my one of the legs of my 3-legged stool. And just the idea of a close encounter with life as it is, not my values, not my belief, not my prior experience, but directly as it is now in all of its raw glory and at times ugliness. So thanks for that.
We probably have time for one more question. If there's somebody who's been holding back and waiting, now's the time. Go ahead, Jesse. I can't unmute myself.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, just a greeting. I just want to say hi, Deb. I'm glad to hear what you've been up to. Yeah, right? Yeah.
It's been a minute.
Yep. So thank you for your presentation, and I've learned a lot about what you're up to and how things might look way down there on the border. A lot of strange parallels to some of the things I'm doing, just working with unhoused people in my local community. So, it's a lot of the same volunteers showing up, basic needs, and trying to build community. So, yay you. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Well, yay you. And thank you for naming people without shelter. That is another one of the contradictions that I am feeling deeply this year. I'm still doing my late afternoon trash walks when I can, and there's evidence all over, unless you get into the wealthier parts of town, that people are walking the streets at night and sleeping in doorways of abandoned buildings. In fact, where I'm staying next door, there's a lovely little patio where I can hang out my clothes, a couple chairs where I can sit in the sun. There's an alley just outside of there. And I thought, wonder what's on the other side of this fence. And it's a lot with stone walls around it. The house was torn down. And there's a shelter made of cardboard there with a Red Cross blanket. And I've seen some cosmetics strewn around. And, some people say you ought to be helping the people who are already here. You ought to be helping the vets. You ought to be helping this group. And I'm like, this is about a disrespect for life and having the wrong, in my view, priorities. We're building a new, outside of El Paso, 6-lane highway with service roads around it. That's where I went to this ICE check-in. There is a new federal building there. There is a new armed forces building there. There's a new Texas National Guard building there. That's what we're investing in. And we're paying for the surgeries of the people coming over the wall. We paid for the wall. We're paying for all of the dogs, the horses, the equipment. And, life is precious. Life has value. And let's not get into these hierarchies of who's most deserving. We're all deserving. All deserving. Yeah, so thank you, Jessica.
That's the
Great
core
to see you.
of all, the love and
Thank you for
to live, to have independence. And that's what she is about too. So thank you so much, Deb, for the conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, friends, for coming. I would like to invite everybody to unmute for just a moment here, and let's say a thank you to Deb and send each other off with a love and a blessing.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Deb.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Blessings
Thanks, Carrie,
on
for
you.
hosting.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you so much, Deb.
I'll send a
Thank
follow-up
you.
email with the video of today and maybe a link to Annunciation House too.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, friends.
Thank you.
Blessings on the
Thanks,
day.
everyone.
Thank you.